As we conclude Yom Kippur, perhaps hearing the closing notes of the shofar still ringing in our ears, I wanted to share a few reflections for us for the upcoming Sukkot holiday. In particular, I offer 7 questions for us to reflect on today. I chose the number 7 in honor of the Kabbalistic custom to invite an ancestral guest, an ushpiz, into the Sukkah for each night of Sukkot. Perhaps you could consider inviting one of these questions as your guest for that evening and reflect upon it with others in your Sukkah. Question 1, structure. When the rabbis describe the construction of a Sukkah, they include many detailed laws about the Sukkah structure itself. It must have at least 2.5 walls. The roof must be made of branches or natural products that will still allow you to see the stars through them. The walls should not move too much in the wind, and many more. While we may not follow all of these details in building our Sukkot, the details point to a broader issue. Given that Sukkot is the holiday of joy, how do we create structure for joy in our lives, both on Sukkot and on other days? Question 2, play. On a related note, when the rabbis talk about what makes a kosher sukkah in the Mishnah, they become very playful. They say you can make a sukkah on a wagon, or on a boat, or even on top of a camel. The playfulness of the rabbis in the Mishnah may help us reflect on the question of how do we integrate play into our lives in general. Question 3, fragility. By its nature, the sukkah is a temporary and fragile structure. During the holiday of Sukkot, there is also a tradition to read Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, a text that highlights the fragility and even futility of our lives. Taking time amidst our joy to recognize our fragility can be an important counterbalance and a way to remember the fragile world we live in. So by nature, this fragile structure raises the question, how can we take time to acknowledge our own fragility and the fragility of the planet in our lives? Question 4, reaching out. There were a large number of sacrifices that were brought to the temple during Sukkot that added up to 70 bulls and other animals. The rabbis picked up on this number 70, which they mythically matched to the number of nations and languages in the world. In the rabbis' eyes, this was interpreted to mean that in the end of days, all peoples would join in the Sukkot celebration in the temple. But in our eyes, we can understand this as a time when we can ask ourselves, how are we building relationship and connection to other faiths and other peoples? Question 5. One of the key elements of Sukkot is the waving of the 4 species, the etrog, lulav, myrtle, and willow branches in all directions, as a way of trying to draw down the rains and blessing. Many believe early Judaism drew from pagan ritual to connect to the fertility of the earth. While we may have different ways of relating to the natural world than our ancestors did, Sukkot gives us an opportunity to connect with that same spirit of seeking to build connections with our natural environment. So the question is, how can Sukkot inspire us on a more regular basis to connect to the world around us? Question 6. The rabbis imagined that when the Israelites were in the desert, the divine clouds of glory settled over the booths where the Israelites were dwelling. Later Kabbalistic teachings understand the Sukkah as a locus of the indwelling presence of the divine feminine, who rests with us and flows into our lives. However we conceptualize the divine, can Sukkot inspire us to reflect and explore how to take on practice in the coming year that will help us stay spiritually grounded and open to the mysteries of creation? And finally, question 7, pilgrimage. Sukkot, biblically, was simply known as Hechag, the festival. It was perhaps the most important of the festival pilgrimages in ancient times. Aside from major sports events and periodic protest marches, opportunities for pilgrimage today are sometimes fewer and far between. But what might it mean to reconsider pilgrimage in your life? Could this be a way to create more space for the sacred? So I hope those questions are useful, and as we move into Zman Simchatenu, the time of our joy, I want to wish us all a Chag Sukkot Sameach, a happy and joyous Sukkot. May we take time to continue to celebrate and deepen into our lives.